My name is Wendy Morgan, and I'm 52 years old. If you saw my life from the outside a few years ago, you probably would have thought I had it all together. A husband, kids, a house with a tidy lawn, the kind of life people post on Facebook with cheesy captions about blessed. Inside that house, though, it was like living in a silent vacuum. No warmth, no joy, just tension, exhaustion, and the constant feeling that I was one bad day away from everything collapsing. Last year, my ex-husband had an affair and told me he wanted a divorce. The strange thing is, the first emotion I felt wasn't heartbreak. It was relief. A small, guilty, almost shameful little wave of relief that washed through me before the panic kicked in. While he was standing in the kitchen, arms folded like a disappointed manager about to fire an employee, the first thought that popped into my head was, oh, so this is how it finally ends. From the outside, people thought we were strong. We took family pictures at Christmas, we smiled at neighborhood barbecues, we attended school events together. But for years, our marriage had been dead. I just hadn't buried it yet. The cracks started with money. They always do, don't they? I worked hard, kept track of every bill, every due date, every little emergency that came up with our kid. Meanwhile, my husband had a habit of treating our bank account like his personal toy box. He'd quietly transfer out large sums of money, and I'd only notice when I went to pay the power bill and saw the account balance glaring back at me like a bad joke. "Why is the mortgage payment short?" I'd ask, my voice shaking just a little. He'd shrug, not even looking away from his phone. "You just need to make more, Wendy. I can't carry everything." That was the script. No matter how much I earned, it was never enough. No matter how much I gave, it was never appreciated. It always somehow turned into a conversation about how I had failed him. I tried. I really did. I planned date nights. I booked a sitter and surprised him with reservations at his favorite restaurant. I organized family outings, parks, movies, weekend drives, anything to remind us that we were more than two adults sharing a roof and bills. Most of the time he would sigh, complain, or flat out refuse. "I'm tired. Do we really have to go?" He'd grumble, already lying back down on the bed. "You're always trying to drag me somewhere." Eventually, he just stopped coming along. He preferred to sleep, or sit scrolling on his phone, or watch TV in the dark like he was trying to disappear into the couch. When I went out alone with our kid, he'd complain later that I was trying to make him look bad. When I stayed home to avoid the fight, he'd complain that I was suffocating him. There's a special kind of loneliness that comes from sharing a bed with someone who resents you. I remember lying awake some nights while he snored beside me, staring at the ceiling and tracing the cracks in the paint with my eyes, thinking, is this it? Is this the rest of my life? Then the overnight started. At first, he said he was staying at a friend's place, some guy from work I barely knew. The first time he called, he said, "We're just having a late poker night. I'll crash on his couch." But then it became once a week, then twice, then whole weekends. His explanations got shorter, sharper. When I asked questions like, "Is everything okay? Where are you staying?" he snapped, "Why are you interrogating me? It's none of your business what I do with my time." None of my business. My husband, the father of my child, vanishing overnight and telling me it was none of my business. I remember standing in the kitchen after one of those arguments, holding a dish towel so tightly my knuckles went white, thinking, this isn't confusion. This is contempt. I tried including him anyway. Texts about school events, reminders about family dinners, invitations that I already knew he'd ignore. Eventually, I stopped asking. I focused on my child. I focused on keeping the lights on, the fridge full, and the house from falling apart. That's when he accused me of keeping our kid away from him. "You just want to turn them against me," he spat once, leaning in, eyes bloodshot. "You're poisoning them." The irony made me dizzy. He never showed up, but somehow I was the one to blame. When he finally asked for a divorce, he didn't sit down and talk like a partner. He came home one day, dropped a thick envelope on the table and said, "My lawyer will handle everything. Just sign." I picked up the papers with trembling hands. I wasn't just scared of being alone. I was scared of starting over at my age, of losing the house, of failing my kid. But somewhere under the anxiety was that same quiet relief, whispering, "This is your way out." What he didn't count on was that I would actually read every single word. The first draft of the divorce papers was a disaster. My last name was spelled wrong. His middle name was wrong. Our child's name and birth date were wrong. The marriage date was off by 3 years. The address listed for the house was a place we'd never even lived. It got worse. The paperwork listed children that weren't ours, pets we never owned, a joint business worth $500,000 that didn't exist. There was even a paragraph about dividing the value of commercial properties we had supposedly invested in together. I sat at the kitchen table, papers spread out like a crime scene, and actually laughed. "So I'm divorcing a stranger who owns imaginary businesses and phantom dogs," I muttered to myself. Good to know. I sent the draft back unsigned, with a calm little note. "These details are incorrect. Please revise." They sent a second draft. Somehow it was worse. They fixed one thing and broke three others. At one point, even his lawyer's own name was spelled wrong in the signature block. I had to cover my mouth to keep from laughing when I saw that. You might think all of this was just annoying, and it was. But it was also precious to me for one reason: time. Every mistake delayed the hearing. Every revision gave me a little more space to breathe, to think, to plan. While his side fumbled paperwork, I quietly changed passwords, separated finances, and started imagining a future where I didn't have to explain every grocery purchase. By the time we reached the seventh draft, they had managed to fix most of the obvious errors. But even the final version that went to the court still had major inaccuracies in it. The kind of carelessness that told me everything I needed to know about how seriously he and his lawyer had ever taken our life together. To them, it was just paperwork. To me, it was the legal autopsy of a marriage that had been dead for years. Every time I caught another error, part of me felt frustrated. Another part of me thought, good, let it drag. Let this process move as slowly and clumsily as our marriage did. I'm not the one who rushed out the door. I didn't say any of this to him, of course. On the rare occasions we did speak, he acted as if the delays were my fault. "You're just trying to make this harder than it has to be," he'd snap over the phone. No, I would think. I'm just not signing away my life blind. What he didn't understand was that every typo, every wrong date, every imaginary asset, they were all little signs. Signals that the world he'd tried to control was loosening around him, and that for once, the chaos was working in my favor. By the time the court finally had a version of the paperwork they were willing to accept, months had gone by. Months where he stayed out more, came home less, and pretended not to notice that every time he walked through the door, the house felt less and less like his. He had no idea that while his lawyer scrambled to fix their mistakes, I was quietly preparing for something he never thought I'd really do: live without him. The day of the court hearing, the sky was gray in that heavy way that feels like the weather already knows something is about to end. I sat in the hallway outside the courtroom, hands clasped together, staring at the scuffed floor tiles while my ex-husband paced back and forth like a man preparing to deliver a performance rather than face the consequences of his actions. When the bailiff finally opened the door, I took a slow breath and walked in. My ex-husband's lawyer was already there, smug, unprepared, and still holding a stack of papers that I knew were probably full of mistakes they hoped the judge wouldn't catch. The judge didn't even have to look long. "Ms. Morgan," he said, eyes moving between the documents and me, "I see a significant number of corrections have been requested by you during this process." "Yes, Your Honor," I replied calmly. Many errors were made in the drafts sent to me. Wrong names, wrong dates, incorrect property listings, even children we do not have. The judge adjusted his glasses and looked directly at my ex-husband's lawyer. "Is this accurate?" The lawyer's lips tightened. "There were minor clerical issues, Your Honor." 7 drafts of clerical issues?" the judge asked, unimpressed. I didn't gloat, I didn't smirk. I simply folded my hands in my lap as the judge pressed on. "And regarding your motion that Ms. Morgan should pay all legal and court fees," the judge continued, "I'm having difficulty understanding why she should be penalized for delays stemming from your own office's repeated mistakes." A silence fell so thick I felt it settle on my shoulders. "My client," the lawyer began. "Your client," the judge cut in sharply, "should be grateful this matter is even moving forward at this point." Then he turned to me. "Miss Morgan, you will not be responsible for his fees." My ex-husband stiffened beside his lawyer, his jaw clenched, eyes narrowing. That was the first moment I saw something like fear flicker across his face, as if he was finally realizing he was losing control of the narrative he'd built around us for years. After the ruling, he couldn't even look at me. Not that I expected him to. If he did, he'd have to acknowledge what his actions had carved into our lives. Once the divorce was finalized, he moved out the same week, straight into the arms of the woman he'd left me for. She was more than ready for him. too ready, honestly. I remember thinking that anyone who opened their door that wide for a married man wasn't someone who would handle a relationship with stability or grace. And I was right. It didn't take long for the two of them to start burning. Fast, loudly, violently. When I changed all my bank passwords and removed him from every financial connection we had, he suddenly found himself living without the income he'd relied on for years. He wasn't just shocked, he was stunned, like he truly believed I'd keep funding his life even after he destroyed our marriage. That was when the consequences really started. My ex-husband had been managing the house payments, or so he claimed. I trusted him with that because the property technically belonged to his uncle. It was the home of his grandmother originally, passed down through the family. It was supposed to be protected, treasured. Instead, he had been skipping payments for months. I found this out the same way a person might find out their roof is about to collapse. Unexpectedly, urgently, and with no time to prepare. One afternoon, his uncle knocked on my door. When I opened it, he looked frantic and pale, holding a stack of overdue notices in his trembling hands. "Wendy," he said, voice cracking, "the bank is about to take the house." I blinked. "What? What do you mean?" He thrust the papers toward me. He said he was paying the mortgage. He wasn't. 6 months behind. $15,000. I can't lose this house. Can you help me? I stared at him, my heart twisting. None of this was my mess. None of this should have been my responsibility. I could have said no. I had every reason to say no. But the thought of the bank seizing the house his grandmother had worked for, the history tucked inside its walls, it hit me harder than I expected. "I don't have 15,000 lying around," I said honestly. His shoulders sank. "But," I continued quietly, "what if I bought the house from you instead?" He looked up, eyes widening. "You'd buy it?" "If you're willing," I said. "It's the only way I can help without sinking myself." He hesitated only a moment before nodding. Yes, I'd sell it to you." That was how I ended up purchasing the house that had once belonged to my ex-husband's grandmother. A house that should have been cared for. Instead, he nearly let it slip away because he was too busy playing happy families with his mistress to handle his responsibilities. Signing those papers felt surreal. As the deal finalized, something unexpected washed over me. Not triumph, but peace. I wasn't taking the house from my ex-husband. I was salvaging a memory his own family cared about more than he ever did. And suddenly, I wasn't afraid of starting over anymore. Life after divorce wasn't easy, but it was clear in ways my marriage had never been. I got a promotion at work, a big one, the kind that came with better pay and a sense of validation I hadn't felt in years. I started healing in small ways at first, cooking real meals again, buying myself clothes I actually liked, taking quiet walks after putting my child to bed. Therapy helped too. My therapist told me something during one of our early sessions that I still think about often. "Wendy, you weren't living a life, you were surviving it." And she was right. I had survived a marriage that drained me, survived years of manipulation, emotional distance, financial pressure, survived being blamed for everything while carrying more than my share. But now I was beginning to live again. What I didn't know, not yet, was that my ex-husband wasn't done with me, not by a long shot. And while I was rebuilding my life brick by brick, he was about to come crashing back into it with all the chaos he'd created. For a while, everything felt almost calm. Strange, unfamiliar, beautiful calm. I focused on rebuilding myself piece by piece, physically, mentally, emotionally. My child thrived. Our home slowly transformed into something warm again. I even caught myself laughing more often, which felt like the biggest miracle of all. Meanwhile, my ex-husband's life was unraveling in a way only a man who never thought ahead could experience. The woman he'd moved in with, his savior, as he once called her, turned out to be volatile, controlling, and emotionally vicious. I didn't celebrate that, I didn't cheer, but I also couldn't ignore the harsh irony. The very chaos he'd thrown me into had become the new soundtrack of his life. And then came the day everything spilled over. One night, our child called me after spending time with him. Their voice was trembling, thin, barely holding itself together. "Mom," she was screaming at Dad. She hit him. He fell. I called the ambulance. My heart dropped. "Are you okay? Are you safe?" "Yes," they whispered. "But Dad," he wouldn't let them call the police. He said it was an accident. I closed my eyes, fighting back the storm rising in my chest. My child had witnessed something they never should have seen, something that could stain their memories forever. And still, he refused to press charges, still protected the woman who had hurt him, still defended the relationship that was unraveling him. It wasn't love, it was denial. A few weeks later, I was invited to a family gathering on his side of the family. They had always treated me kindly, even through the divorce, and I wanted to keep that bridge intact for my child's sake. So I went. I smiled. I was polite. I made small talk. My ex-husband arrived late, limping slightly, wearing a forced smile that strained at the edges. When he saw me across the room, his entire expression softened, as if he believed the sight of me meant something it didn't. He approached, hovering close enough that I could smell his aftershave. It was the same one he used to wear during our early years, the one I'd bought him for his birthday before everything went downhill. A scent I used to love, now soured by memories. "Wendy," he said, giving me a hopeful smile, "you look beautiful." I stepped back. "Thank you." He kept hovering, kept glancing at my hands, my face, the distance between us. His relatives watched us with two bright eyes, the kind that sparkle with assumptions. I stayed polite, conversed briefly, then excused myself and sat at a table with the older aunties who were too focused on their casseroles to gossip. But the damage was done. He saw my politeness, my distance, and misinterpreted it as something entirely different. Hope. A few nights later, after our child's soccer game, he approached me in the parking lot. The sun was setting, painting the sky in sherbet colors, a beautiful backdrop for a conversation I never wanted to have. "Wendy," he called, jogging awkwardly toward me, "can we talk?" I kept my tone calm. "About what?" He swallowed hard. "Us." I blinked. "There is no us." He shook his head. "Come on. You know we still love each other. We have a kid. I've been thinking, maybe it's time we move back in together." Move back in? With the man who had drained me emotionally and financially? With the man who had abandoned me in every possible way? With the man who was currently living in a violent relationship but wanted me to rescue him again? I stared at him for a moment, long enough to make him shift uncomfortably. "Why would I ever do that?" I asked plainly. He took a deep breath. "Because we belong together, and I know things got messy, but—" "No," I interrupted quietly. "You cheated. Repeatedly. For over a year. You left me. You drained our finances. You blamed me for everything. And now you're asking me to forget all of that?" His jaw tightened, but he pushed through. "We could start fresh." I sighed and crossed my arms. "You still owe me $1,100, I reminded him, "for your car repairs." He perked up instantly. "I'll pay it back if we move in together." I stared at him. And then, without meaning to, I started laughing. Not a polite laugh, not a strained chuckle. I doubled over. It just burst out of me. The absurdity, the audacity, the sheer delusion of his offer. It was unreal. After everything I endured, this was his idea of reconciliation? He stood there shocked, offended, red-faced. "You're laughing at me," he demanded. "I'm laughing," I said through tears, "because after everything you put me through, you think all I ever wanted was to move back into the hell you created." He stared at me with something dark in his eyes. Not anger, not hurt. "Entitlement." "You don't mean that," he said quietly. "You're just upset." "No," I replied. "I'm finally not upset. That's the difference." He stepped back confused. "Wendy, we're a family." "No," I said again, voice gentle but firm. "We are co-parents. That's it." His face crumpled. He turned away slightly, pretending to look at his car so I wouldn't see the tears welling in his eyes. But I did see them, and instead of feeling satisfaction or pity, all I felt was clarity. The kind of clarity that comes when you finally know, without a doubt, that someone no longer holds a single piece of your heart. I drove home that night with the windows down, the cool air brushing against my face like a quiet promise. A promise that I was free. A promise that I was healing. A promise that my story wasn't ending, it was just beginning. What I didn't realize was that his attempt to bring me back was just the start. Soon he would become obsessed with reinserting himself into my life in ways I couldn't have imagined. And he would learn, slowly, painfully, that I wasn't the woman he once controlled. Not anymore. There's a strange kind of power in rebuilding yourself quietly. You don't announce it. You don't need anyone's approval. You simply wake up one day and realize you're no longer living in survival mode. You're living in color again. That's what life felt like for me. My routine changed. My spirit changed. My confidence grew back in small, steady pieces. I started dating. Not recklessly, but openly, with a sense of curiosity I hadn't felt in years. Most dates were forgettable. Some were awkward. A few were surprisingly fun. And then there was Shane. We met on a Tuesday evening at a little coffee shop downtown. He was warm, grounded, steady, in a quiet way that didn't beg for attention. A man who listened more than he talked. A man who didn't flinch when I mentioned I had a child. A man who didn't shrink when I mentioned divorce. Our connection wasn't fireworks. It was a spark that grew slowly, intentionally, consistently, until it warmed entire rooms inside me that had been cold for years. We took things slow at first, but one weekend he asked, "Would you like to take a short trip? Nothing big, just good food, a nice view, and no responsibilities for 48 hours." I said yes. It was the kind of trip that feels like a sigh of relief. Good meals, a few drinks, sitting by the river, laughing over old stories, walking through tiny shops, taking pictures with ridiculous souvenirs. I felt light, weightless even, like myself. Shane took a few photos of us, and one night he asked, "Would you mind if I posted these?" He said it softly, gently. Unlike my ex-husband, he always asked, never assumed. "Go ahead," I said. "Tag me if you want." I didn't think much of it, but my ex-husband, he thought everything of it. The next day, he blew up my phone with calls I ignored. Then came the text. Long, furious paragraphs full of accusations, all sent in rapid-fire bursts. When I finally answered his call just to stop the notifications, I barely had time to say hello. "How could you do this to me?" he screamed. I blinked, stunned. "Do what?" "Posting pictures with another man. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is for me?" For him. Always for him. I sat on my couch, staring out the window as his voice crackled through the phone like static. My child was in their room doing homework. I kept my voice low. "We've been divorced for a year," I said. "You left me. You cheated. You moved in with someone else before the ink dried." "That's not the point," he snapped. "You blindsided me." "You've been living with your mistress for months," I reminded him. "That's different." "Explain how." He inhaled sharply. "Because you're supposed to care about how this makes me look." I laughed. Not loudly this time, but the disbelief slipped out before I could stop it. "You cheated on me for more than a year," I said calmly. "And now you're upset that I posted pictures with someone I'm dating? You're making me look bad online." "You did that yourself." That silence, sharp, heavy boiling. Then he exploded again. "You're selfish. You're inconsiderate. You didn't think about my feelings. You didn't think about the possibility of us getting back together." I sat up. Why would I think about that possibility? There isn't one. He ignored it, completely. "You killed the last bit of love I had for you," he said dramatically, as if we were in some tragic soap opera. "Seeing you with another man? It destroyed me." I couldn't help it. I pressed a hand over my mouth to stifle a laugh. "You don't think this is funny," he said angrily. "I think," I replied, unable to keep the irony out of my voice, "that it's absurd you believe I owe you an explanation for living my life." He growled into the phone. "I want to meet him." "You want to what?" "I want to meet this Shane guy. I want to see what kind of man would break up a family." "A family you already broke," I said. He didn't listen. He never did. He continued ranting for 30 straight minutes. I set the phone on speaker, walked around cleaning the kitchen, folded laundry, and checked on my child while he ranted about betrayal, scandal, humiliation, and how I was ruining his life. When I finally picked the phone back up, he was still talking. "And by posting those pictures, you've ruined any chance we had of getting back together." I sighed. "We never had a chance. Not after what you did. Not after what I survived." He became quieter then, his breath shaky, and suddenly he broke down crying. "Wendy, I thought someday you'd take me back." I froze. Take him back? After everything? After the financial manipulation, the emotional neglect, the lies, the cheating, the destruction of our home? After the endless nights I cried myself to sleep while he stayed out with someone else? No, that door wasn't just closed, it was locked, boarded up, bricked over, and the key was buried 6 feet deep. "I'm sorry you feel that way," I said gently, "but I've moved on. We're not getting back together." The truth shattered him. I could hear it in the silence. He hung up without another word. But I knew better than to think he'd stay quiet. Men like him don't fade out gracefully. They lash out. They cling. They try one last desperate grab for control. And he did. Oh, he absolutely did. But by then, my world had changed. I wasn't his anymore. Not in any way. After that meltdown, I expected him to calm down, to leave me alone, to finally understand the boundary I had drawn so clearly. But men like my ex-husband don't retreat. They regroup. And that's exactly what he did. A few days later, he showed up outside my house unannounced. Not pounding on the door, not screaming, just standing there, hands shoved in his jacket pockets, rocking on his heels like a teenager waiting to ask someone to prom. The sight made my stomach twist. I opened the door only halfway. "What are you doing here?" He swallowed hard, eyes darting past me, searching for something, maybe checking if Shane was there, maybe hoping I'd invite him in. I need to talk to you," he said. "No," I replied firmly, "not unless it's about our child." His shoulders slumped. "It is. About them. And about me." I didn't respond, so he continued rambling. She's been hurting me," he whispered. "My girlfriend. I don't know what to do." I stared at him, unsure if he wanted sympathy, applause, or a rescue mission. "Are you asking for help?" I said slowly, "or are you asking for me back?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. That silence said everything. "You need to leave," I told him. "Now." But he wasn't done. "She hit me again last night," he said softly. "Our child saw it, and I didn't want them to be scared. I don't know how to make this stop." His voice cracked, and for one moment, one brief, flickering moment, I felt a pang of human compassion. Not for him, for our child. "What happened is unacceptable," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "You cannot let them be in danger. If you won't press charges, then I may have to take steps myself." He looked at me sharply. "What steps?" A pause. "Full custody," I said, his face drained of color. "That's not fair," he protested. "It's not about fairness," I said. "It's about safety." He didn't argue after that. He just stepped back, shaking, eyes flashing with something complicated. Fear, anger, shame. Then he left without another word. Over the next few days, memories I'd buried deep started to claw their way back up. My therapist once warned me, when you finally heal, your mind will start returning the memories you shoved into the dark. She was right. I remembered the night he came home smelling like someone else's perfume. I remembered the secret phone I found in his glove compartment. I remembered the unpaid bills, the lies, the sudden overtime shifts that never lined up. But some memories were darker. Some memories I still struggled to speak out loud. There was one in particular, the night everything shifted permanently inside me. It was 2 years before the divorce. Late, quiet. A fight that started over something small, money, of course, and ended with him spiraling into a rage I hadn't seen before. I was sitting on my side of the bed. He was pacing. Then, suddenly, he grabbed the gun from the nightstand and fired into the mattress, right where my legs had been only seconds earlier. The sound was deafening. The smell of gunpowder filled the room, thick and metallic. My ears rang. My body froze. He didn't point it at me. He didn't say a word. He just fired it. A warning, a message, a line crossed that could never be uncrossed. I never slept in that bed again. I barely slept at all. When I finally told my therapist about it months later, she asked, "Why didn't you leave then?" I didn't have an answer. Because survival isn't logical. Because fear distorts your reality. Because you tell yourself it was a one-time thing. Because you hope. Because you're ashamed. Because you don't want your child to see you break. But the truth is simple. I should have left then. I just didn't know how. A year after that incident, when I discovered his affair, I reacted all wrong. I tried to fix things. I tried to salvage a marriage that was already a rotting structure held together by denial. I should have walked away immediately, but instead I enrolled us in therapy, pleading for answers he wasn't willing to give. By the time we finally did go to counseling, our child had already lost respect for him. I had already fallen into the kind of numbness that feels like drowning. The trust was gone. The love was gone. I was a hollow version of myself. Then came the smear campaign. He went on social media claiming I was abusive, unstable, manipulative, financially controlling. Every accusation he hurled was a projection of what he had actually done. People reached out to me, friends, family, even coworkers who barely knew me asked if I was okay. I posted one simple message, a statement clearing my name, nothing more. After that, I stopped trying to defend myself. My life became smaller, but strangely lighter, and I began rebuilding. That summer, during my own quiet revolution, I met Shane, and life softened. We spent weekends exploring small towns, visiting distilleries, watching live music. He introduced me to new books. I introduced him to my favorite hiking trails. We navigated holidays together, Thanksgiving with his family, Christmas with mine. For the first time in years, I felt like someone saw me. Not as a wallet, not as a caregiver, not as a placeholder, as a woman, as a partner, as someone deserving of gentleness and care. Our relationship deepened in a way I never expected, the kind that felt steady, real, unrushed. But as my life grew fuller, my ex-husband's presence cast longer shadows. He wasn't done with his chaos. Not yet. And the next twist, the next moment he tried to claw his way back into my life, was coming sooner than I knew. By the time the second anniversary of my divorce rolled around, my life had shifted so dramatically that sometimes I didn't recognize the woman in the mirror. And for the first time in many years, that was a good thing. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. And yet, my ex-husband lingered in the background like a stubborn ghost who didn't understand he was dead. On November 3rd, the exact date the court had stamped our marriage as officially over, I woke up feeling something I couldn't quite name. Light, free, confident. I texted Shane good morning, stretched under the blankets, and smiled at the thought of the life I had now. Later that evening, I met my therapist and told her, I think I finally closed the door. She smiled softly. You didn't just close it, Wendy. You locked it, you boarded it up, and you handed the key to yourself. She was right. As Shane and I grew closer, the question of distance became the only real obstacle. He lived an hour away, and juggling schedules meant we saw each other less often than either of us wanted. Sometimes it felt like the universe was asking us, are you serious about this? We were. More than I expected, honestly. One night over dinner, medium rare steak for him, grilled salmon for me, Shane reached across the table and held my hand. Wendy, he said softly, I've been thinking about something. My heart raced, not with fear, but anticipation. I think it might be time for me to move closer, he continued, to you, to what we're building. I blinked. Move to my city? Yes, he smiled. But I'll keep my house. My daughter needs it, and it's important to me that we don't rush anything. My chest warmed. This was exactly what I wanted. Commitment without pressure. Presence without control. Love without conditions. So he came. Not in a whirlwind, not recklessly, but carefully, thoughtfully, like an adult who understands that the best relationships take time and intention. And slowly he became part of my daily life. Not replacing anything, just adding something I hadn't realized I'd been missing. Of course, this didn't sit well with my ex-husband. He had been sending me occasional drunk texts for months, sometimes apologizing, sometimes blaming me, sometimes rambling about memories we once shared. The emotional whiplash was exhausting, so I started responding only when it concerned our child. Anything else went unanswered. But the more I ignored him, the more unhinged his messages became. I still love you, Wendy. You ruined our family. You never cared. Why did you do this to me? You think he's better than me? You'll be back. You always come back. No, I wouldn't. Not in this lifetime or the next. Meanwhile, my life blossomed. I cooked again. I decorated the house. I took long walks, read new books, learned new recipes, started a journaling habit, played soccer with my child every weekend, and found a peace I didn't know was possible. My ex-husband still tried to stir chaos, but for the first time ever, it didn't reach me. His words bounced off walls I had built out of healing, perspective, and genuine happiness. And Shane, he became my calm in the storm, my anchor, my reminder that being loved shouldn't feel like walking on broken glass. We took another trip, shared more photos, held hands in public without fear, and yes, my ex-husband saw them. His meltdown came quickly and predictably, but I didn't let it touch me. People always talk about karma like it's some burning revenge. But here's the truth I came to understand. Real karma is living well after someone tried to break you. Real revenge is peace. Real victory is freedom. And while my ex-husband was still stuck in the chaos of his own making, I was living a life he never thought I'd have without him. A life that didn't include him. A life that didn't need him. A life that grew stronger every day he faded further away. On my 52nd birthday, after a day filled with laughter, calls from friends, a homemade cake baked by my child, and a surprise dinner reservation from Shane, I sat alone for a moment and took it in. This peace, this joy, this version of me. I thought back on everything. The heartbreak, the betrayal, the fear, the gunshot, the lies, the late night crying, the empty bed I used to lie in beside a man who didn't love me. And I realized something so simple it made my breath catch. I had become the woman I needed when I was drowning. That was the real turning point, not the divorce, not the new relationship, not the move or the job or the weight loss. It was the moment I chose myself, consistently, quietly, fiercely, until choosing myself became my new way of life. My ex-husband's last drunk text came a few days later. I miss you. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I turned my phone off and went to sleep beside a man who actually valued me. The past may have shaped me, but it no longer defined me. I was finally free, fully, beautifully, irrevocably,